For our honeymoon, my wife and I chose to travel to Hawaii. We stayed on Maui, which we had heard was the perfect island for couples celebrating something special. Our hotel sat right on the beach, and every evening there were torch performances, luau's, and different kinds of live shows. During the first few days, we spent most of our time drinking, relaxing, and trying out different restaurants. By the fourth day, we wanted to do something more adventurous. Exploring one of the jungle hiking trails had been on our list for the trip. There are countless trails on the island, and we decided to drive our rental car out to the parking area near Pie Trail, a scenic route that winds through a bamboo forest deep in the jungle. We had heard from locals and other visitors that the trail eventually leads to several waterfalls and hidden swimming spots. That sounded perfect to us. When we arrived, there were a handful of cars in the lot, though it served more than just that one trail. As we started walking, we were surrounded by towering walls of bamboo on both sides. It felt like we had stepped into a completely different world. I had never experienced anything like it before. At one point, my wife stopped and pointed to something just off the path. It was a mongoose. It had paused and was staring at us. We both thought it was adorable. My wife slowly approached it, crouching down to make herself look smaller and less threatening. I followed her lead. Of course, the little animal darted away almost immediately, and my wife laughed and chased after it playfully. I ran after her. As we wandered farther into the jungle and away from the marked trail, we began to hear the sound of rushing water. A waterfall had to be nearby. We followed the noise until we came across a stunning pond with a small waterfall pouring into it. We dipped our feet into the water and were surprised by how comfortable the temperature was. It was deep enough to fully submerge ourselves, so we decided to take a spontaneous swim without our clothes, assuming the chances of anyone else finding us they were slim. That assumption turned out to be wrong. While we were in the water, my wife suddenly gasped and whispered, "Oh my God." She pointed toward the trees. Standing partially hidden behind a tree was an older man wearing a straw hat and sporting a long gray beard. He was just staring at us. Instead of shouting at him to leave, I awkwardly waved, which in hindsight made no sense. He did not wave back. He did not smile. He did not move at all. I told my wife we should get out of there, but she did not want to climb out of the water naked while he was watching. I understood. So I called out to him and asked if he needed something. After a moment, he responded in a deep voice, saying he was looking for his dog. I told him we had not seen any dog, and then he walked away. I turned to my wife and said we needed to leave right away. We got out, dried off, and dressed as quickly as we could. When we tried to locate the trail again, we realized we had wandered too far. We could not figure out which direction we had come from, and there was no cell service in that part of the jungle. As the afternoon turned into evening, panic started to creep in. By the time the sun began to set, my wife was on the verge of tears. As it grew darker, we kept hearing faint footsteps somewhere behind us. It felt like someone was following us. Eventually, it was completely dark, and we had to rely on the flashlights from our nearly dead phones. When we heard the sound of movement behind us again, I whispered to my wife to turn off the light so we would not reveal where we were. For a moment, everything was pitch black. As my eyes adjusted, I made out a figure about 10 feet away, slowly moving closer. I stepped back and positioned myself in front of my wife. In a shaky voice, I asked, "What do you want?" My wife had not seen him yet, so she turned her flashlight back on and pointed it toward the figure. The beam revealed the same older man in the straw hat, holding a hacksaw. We both screamed. My wife cried out in fear, and I shouted at her to run. We took off through the jungle without using our lights, relying on the faint natural light to guide us. Thankfully, we were wearing proper hiking clothes and sneakers. We kept running until I finally got a bit of cell reception. I pulled up the map and followed the directions back toward the parking lot. It took about 10 to 15 minutes of nonstop running. When we finally reached the car, it felt like we had been given a second chance at life. The next morning, we went straight to the local police department and reported everything, hoping to warn other tourists who might visit that same trail. After that, we tried our best to enjoy the rest of our honeymoon, but the experience definitely cast a shadow over what was supposed to be the happiest trip of our lives. We spent our honeymoon in Sicily. Our hotels were booked in Palermo, Cefalù, and then Messina in that order. While staying in Messina, we did most of our sightseeing around places like Taormina. The city was filled with stunning old architecture and museums, which is exactly the kind of thing my wife Patricia and I love to explore. Messina is very much a port city, and like the rest of Sicily, it draws plenty of English-speaking tourists along with Italian locals. We only know a small amount of Italian, nothing beyond a basic level. Quite a few locals would approach us trying to sell souvenirs or other items. At night, the atmosphere in our area was lively and upbeat. There was music playing, people drinking, dancing, and just enjoying themselves. We joined in a bit, having some drinks while continuing to wander around and take everything in. As the night went on, we ended up drinking more than we planned, and time seemed to slip away from us. Before we knew it, it was after midnight, and the streets had started to quiet down. On our way back to the hotel, we made a wrong turn and lost our sense of direction. Eventually, we found ourselves walking into a narrow alley that felt sketchy and isolated. Patricia started getting nervous about the area we had wandered into. I put my arm around her to reassure her and keep us moving. Out of nowhere, a man approached us, standing far too close and speaking rapid-fire Italian. He was talking so fast that we could not make out a single word. We could not tell if he was upset or trying to warn us about something, but he seemed frantic. The only word we could clearly pick out was phantasma, which he kept repeating. At that moment, I had no idea what it meant. I gently pushed him aside so we could move past and guided Patricia out of the alley. He continued shouting at us in Italian as we walked away, but we did not understand any of it. Once we were a safe distance away, I pulled out my phone and searched for the meaning of the word phantasma. It translates to ghost. When we realized that, we both stopped and looked at each other. I let out a nervous laugh, hoping Patricia would laugh too, because the idea sounded ridiculous. Still, we were clearly in a dark and questionable part of the city, and there was not another person in sight. Normally, we would have called an Uber, but that is not really an option in Sicily, so we had no choice but to walk. I have to admit, I was just as uneasy as Patricia. We had heard that certain neighborhoods could be unsafe late at night. Then, out of nowhere, we heard the sound of a woman crying behind us. We both heard it at the same time and turned around. About 10 yards away was a young woman who was unusually tall, walking slowly in our direction. Her face was covered by her hands as she cried. Her height looked almost unnatural. She seemed taller than me, which is not common. It was unsettling enough that even Patricia, who is usually compassionate and kind, whispered that we needed to get away from her immediately. We began jogging down a narrow street and took a left into another alley. When we looked back, we could still hear the crying. The woman was now at the entrance of the alley we had just entered, still moving at the same slow pace, with her face hidden in her hands. It felt like we were trapped in a maze of tight alleys and one-way streets. Every time we turned a corner, we continued to hear the crying behind us. The sound only stopped once we reached a larger road with cars and other people around. From there, we walked quickly back to our hotel. Patricia kept insisting that what we saw was a ghost, and every time she said it, I felt a chill run through me. No written account can fully capture how disturbing it was to see that tall, thin woman moving toward us in that alley, especially after that man had repeated the Italian word for ghost again and again. I cannot completely rule out the possibility that it was some elaborate prank. For all I know, we may have stumbled into someone filming a joke for an Italian YouTube channel. But Patricia remains convinced that we encountered something supernatural, and even now, thinking about that night still gives me goosebumps. We are not exactly a wealthy couple. We both work regular 9-to-5 jobs and do our best to stay afloat. We are in a better place now, but when we first got married, money was tight. So when it was time to plan our honeymoon, we could not afford anything extravagant. My wife, whose name I will leave out, searched for budget-friendly beach destinations. She found a private house in the Bahamas listed on Airbnb for 3 nights, and it seemed like a great deal. After paying for the flights and the rental, it still was not too expensive, so we booked it. When we arrived, we entered a code into the lockbox to get inside. The house had a large living room and kitchen area, 1 bedroom, a bathroom, and a spacious back deck that led directly to a private stretch of beach. We spent our entire first day relaxing by the water and later walked to a nearby restaurant for dinner. When we returned that night, things started to feel strange. As soon as we stepped inside, we noticed some of our belongings did not seem to be where we had left them. Our sandals and bags looked slightly out of place. Nothing was missing, though, so we blamed each other, assuming one of us had moved things earlier. We decided to unwind in the hot tub on the back deck. While we were soaking, we both heard a noise from inside the house, like a door slamming or something heavy hitting the floor. I immediately got out and walked back inside, water dripping everywhere. All the doors were shut. I could not remember if we had left them open earlier. I checked the bedroom and bathroom carefully, but everything appeared empty. I returned outside, grabbed a towel, and got dressed. I was finished with the hot tub anyway, and my wife was ready to get out too. Still, I felt a bit uneasy. The next day, we once again enjoyed the beach, then spent time exploring some tourist spots around the Bahamas before grabbing dinner. When we came back that evening, we again had the sense that something was off. Our belongings were in roughly the same spots, but both the bedroom and bathroom doors were open, and neither of us remembered leaving them that way. We admitted we might be overthinking things and simply misremembering, but it was starting to feel unsettling. We double-checked that every window and door was locked and decided not to use the hot tub that night. Instead, we stayed inside and watched movies on the living room television, since the house had several streaming services available. There was no second floor, yet we thought we heard faint tapping sounds coming from above us. We wondered if it was the roof, or maybe an iguana, or some other animal. At that point, the idea of some island creature inside the house seemed more believable than an actual intruder. That night, I went to bed before my wife. She was showering when I suddenly heard her scream. I jumped out of bed and rushed into the bathroom. She had already turned off the water and said she thought something was inside the vent above the shower. I stepped onto the edge of the tub and peered inside, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. I did hear small noises coming from within. That seemed to confirm our theory that some kind of rodent or small animal might be in the ventilation system. We told ourselves we only had 1 more day left, so it would not be our problem much longer. We went to sleep together. At some point in the night, I woke up to my wife shaking me. The look on her face instantly filled me with dread. She told me to stay quiet and listen. In the stillness of the room, I could hear it too. There was a frantic whispering sound coming from the ceiling, specifically near one of the vents. That was when I reached for my phone and called the Airbnb owner. As the phone rang, we suddenly heard a vibrating sound directly above us. For a brief moment, I wondered if there was actually an upper level where the owner might be staying. The vibration stopped almost immediately, but my call was still ringing. I turned on my phone's flashlight and aimed it into the vent. For a split second, I saw someone looking down at us through the opening. I distinctly remember seeing their eyes. We threw our important belongings into our bags as fast as we could. It took less than half a minute before we rushed out the front door. We ran down the sandy road until we reached a main street and finally paused to breathe. That night and the following one, we stayed in a cheap hotel. On our last day, we spent most of the time waiting at the airport. We reported everything to Airbnb and were refunded in full. I believe the owner's account was banned. We did not pursue any legal action. We were simply relieved to have our money returned and to be safe. None of our belongings were stolen, but who knows what that man was doing inside the house while we were out.